I'm Jerry Sargent and welcome to Cosmic Truth. In this show we're going to be talking to a number of individuals from across the globe, men and women, insiders that have stepped forwards to tell you, the human race, the truth. We're going to be discussing extraterrestrials, space programs, government issues. We're going to be taking you deep inside Area 51 for a grand tour. We're going to be talking about different levels of density, raising consciousness. We're going to be discussing the ascension process. We're going to be talking about so many different interesting and informative topics. We're going to be sharing information that you must know. Humanity needs to know this information because this information will set you free. In this episode, we're back with insider Trevor Jeremy to discuss in more detail the Star Wars project and the reasons why Trevor was hired to work on the Star Wars project in the first place. It was to do with his background in electronics and anti-gravity. Trevor was hired to produce energy for high particle beam laser weapons. Now, what were these weapons used for? In this interview, we're going to find out exactly what, why. We're going to talk about mysterious illnesses, sudden deaths, and what happened after the Star Wars project. So you left the military, you left the Air Force,
yeah.
And you've been recruited because of your background in electronics into the Star Wars program. So just give us a little bit of background on the Star Wars program, why it was initiated, and what you learned from it, how you were involved in it all.
On coming out of the RAF, just said, we've got a job we'd like you to apply for. It's in your field and it's something you would enjoy. Working in high energy electronics. I said, in what capacity? They said, well, we wanted you to work on projects to produce high voltage and also very, very high amperage circuits, which was something that was up my street. That was my main interest. We wanted you to work in the field of capacitors to supply Tesla coils to produce the energy for these particle beam weapons. And I said, by particle beams you mean lasers? And I said, well, are you talking about solid state lasers or gas lasers? He said, no, solid state lasers.
And what's the difference between a solid state laser and a gas laser?
A gas laser will actually laser gas, normally CO2 or sometimes nitrogen, into a beam of light which is not found in nature, which can penetrate metal, steel, or longer distance, put a spot on the moon.
Okay.
Can mark a spot on the moon from Earth if they're powerful enough. With a solid state laser, you're using a ruby to fire to laze the
a ruby
stone, yeah.
And how big would that ruby stone be?
It could be conceivably anything would fit into a diamond engagement ring.
So a small ruby.
Yeah, but anything up to an industrial ruby, which can be grown artificially, could be as big as a dinner plate.
And what kind of impact could one of these ruby red dinner plates have?
It'd put a spot on the moon with ease.
From Earth?
Yeah.
So you could fire a laser from Earth to the moon and put a spot.
You'd see the dot on the moon.
And when we're talking about a dot, what you just mean like a colour? You'd see it in the distance.
Yeah, like you do with people with lasers.
So are these lasers used to kill people?
Oh yes, they could do.
Yeah.
They could destroy a missile.
They could destroy a missile at what sort of range?
200-300 miles.
Okay.
Plus.
So you were brought on board to create these things, develop these things?
To create the energy, to the power supply.
Okay.
That's all I worked on.
The power supply to enable these lasers to function.
Yeah.
So they already had the lasers, they already had all the technology, they just needed to have enough ampage to power it.
They had the theory, but they couldn't build the actual laser in circuits because we had to figure out a way to deal with the amperage. Now, you're talking about amperages with about 50,000 amps. At probably 2 or 3 million volts. Now the problem is amperage as it goes through a wire. The voltage is not a problem because all it is, it's the number of electrons passing through a wire at the speed of light. But when it's amperage, that number of electrons is vastly increased by 1,000 per volt, per amperage. So it could be up to 1,000,000 times more powerful in the number of electrons going
so
through
the amount of electrons going through the wire is times 1,000.
Just 1,000 and 1,000. It's times 1,000 for each volt of electrons, for each single volt of electron, and it's times by 1,000 per increase in amperage.
And is this easy to do?
No, because the problem is heat. It's like when you got a house and your fuse blow. It's because the fuse blow is there to save the circuit, because if it wasn't there, and it would allow the circuit to heat up so much it could cause a fire. And that was the enemy. The circuit could melt, disintegrate, catch fire, or even explode. So you had to work out what kind of material you're going to use for that kind of voltage, when you think that 50,000 volts will melt a 1-inch diameter round steel rod 1 metre long in about 3 to 5 seconds. Because there's that much current going through it, it heats up, goes red hot, cherry red, white hot, and melts, disintegrates.
Okay. So what do they want to do with these powerful lasers?
We were told the idea was they wanted to develop a means of detecting incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles from the Soviet Union, because at this time the Cold War was still on. This is only the mid-1980s, 1985. And the idea was to shoot these missiles from the ground or from an aircraft-based laser system that could destroy the missiles in space. They would still give off a huge amount of electromagnetic radiation from the explosion, from the nuclear detonation, which would render most electronics, unless they got specially built microprocessors in them which can cope with higher levels of radiation, which they do exist by the military, not by the civilian population. So anything with a chip in for civilian use, like a washing machine, a digital television set, digital computers, laptops, digital watches, anything in a refrigerator, anything that runs any kind of temperature, or television set will all fail due to the electromagnetic radiation emissions from the nuclear detonation above the Earth's atmosphere. But people would be safe from the radiation, it's just these devices would cease to function. So anything analog, anything that runs with a normal electric circuit would function as normal. It's just the chip would be affected because it runs at very low voltage and is more susceptible to electromagnetic radiation emissions from a nuclear device exploding above the atmosphere. And so we were looking at ways of doing that to prevent a nuclear war. There's the world.
So you were told?
So we were told, made to believe. And we did question the point of, well, we want to use microwaves. And I thought, that's odd, because they were talking about diagrams for microwave units which resembled what a microwave oven is.
Why was this odd to use microwaves?
Well, because you wouldn't use anything like that to power a laser.
To power a laser?
Yeah, you wouldn't, in order to fire it. And so there was something else to this project that we weren't being told. And we began to question. And as the people questioned, they began to disappear out the door. And I began to question it in my mind, but I kept quiet because I wasn't sure how this was going to go. And I didn't want to land up in trouble or in jail or anything else for that matter, as I wasn't sure where to go with it. So I just kept quiet and just observed what was going on around me. And you notice the people who questioned what was being done were disappearing, just vanished into thin air. And then a few years later, some have been pushed off a building and they're gone, dead. You learn that some of them have got mysterious illnesses like cancers that, you know, you're supposed to cancer survive. You could survive up to 30 years with a cancer, with skin cancer. You could survive for 5 to 30 years 6 or 7 years on the person and how bad the cancer is, how bad it, because whether it spreads around the body or not. So we knew all these things, and we knew within 5 years, even with the cancer of whatever kind, you have a fair chance of survival. But these people were dying in 3 months, and then they started to die in 3 weeks of accelerated cancer. And you know, this is not normal cancer, this is man-made.
And how do you think this cancer was administered into people?
Could have been through radioactive isotopes in a pill or their food or their drink. They could contaminate even the water they used to wash with, because these installations we worked in were self-contained. We did all our own food, all our own washing, showers.
So you lived on site?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't allowed outside because of the nature of the work.
So you were in there, no daylight?
No, we worked underground.
Okay, where were you working underground?
In this country, but I'm not allowed to say where.
Okay.
Sorry, Jerry.
That's okay.
And you'd work on a contract where you'd work for a week on and a week off. So you were in there for a week, and you come out, have a week off, and you go back.
And what did you tell your friends and family you were doing?
I just told them I was working as a salesman or something. Just tell them anything. I couldn't tell them the truth.
No, that's cool.
Couldn't tell them the truth.
Did you sign any documents with this? Any non-disclosure documents?
Yeah. Yeah. You see, the development work for the Star Wars program didn't tally up with what was being developed. So they wanted very, very high energy, and really energy which wouldn't be required for a laser to shoot a missile at 5-10 miles away, or 30 miles away, or even 300 miles away, with a laser to blow it when it's still on its launch pad. If you could get special forces in there with a unit, a self-contained unit, they can be made that powerful at that kind of range, or from an aircraft.
So to fire a missile and shoot it from 300 miles still requires quite a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But these guys wanted more
Yeah.
energy. How much more?
Probably to the power of 10.
To the power of 10.
Yeah.
So that must have been some... give us an idea of what that kind of power could do.
Getting up to above 50,000 amps. Between 50,000 amps up to a maximum of 100,000 amps.
Okay, to me that means nothing.
No, I know.
So don't apologise. Cool. Yeah. So let's try and give an example. What could that kind of power do, and what could it blow up? If you shot that kind of power into a mountain, would it blow a mountain up, a house? I mean, what would it blow?
The energy would crack granite.
It will crack granite.
Yeah.
And the granite's hard to crack, I assume.
Yeah. It's an igneous volcanic rock. And it would pass through granite, shatter it, and go right through basalt that is not there. And
how thick and deep would that granite be?
Oh, probably about 5-10 feet thick.
It will go straight through it.
Straight through.
And that's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, because of the nature of the power, the ampage would just... It does exactly the same thing. There's no lightning bolt in the atmosphere as it finds its way to Earth to ground. It would just try and grind through the granite, and it finds the path of least resistance through the grains of the rock.
So if you had like some granite and you fired a rocket into it, would the rocket damage the granite?
No, the rocket would just explode.
Really? And the granite would be perfectly fine?
No, it would be damaged, but you know...
It wouldn't go through it?
Depending on how powerful the rocket is.
Yeah.
Because it's got 300 megaton warheads, and if that rock is 3 miles across, then that rock won't be 3 miles across anymore. Mm. You know, if they all detonate simultaneously together, or even individually, that'd be a high probability that rock wouldn't remain in one piece.
So these lasers that you were developing, could they cause a volcano? Could they cause a tsunami?
No.
So once this project closed down, I mean, what it closed down due to money, you were told?
We were told it's due to lack of funding. It's been too expensive. We were using, we start to use air capacitors, and then we found they couldn't hold enough power. So then we start to use acrylic capacitors, where you have, normally in a capacitor you've got a positive plate, which they hold apart, and then you have a negative plate, so go in between the positive plates, so you have a positive and a negative to complete the circuit.
The Star Wars project stopped.
Yeah. And
then you went off and did some historian work. Is that right? And then you found out a few years later that that the Star Wars project had continued in Area 51,
Yes.
and it was now called Haarp.
Yes.
Do you reckon this is a possibility, that they deliberately stopped it in the UK and took it to Area 51 because of the extraterrestrial technology that they had in Area 51, which they could have used to amp up these lasers to make it as effective as possible to cause a tsunami, to change the weather?
Well, you see, you're not dealing with lasers with Haarp, you're dealing with microwave energy. That's all you're dealing with, but you're dealing with lots of it. Enough to change the weather pattern.
Is extraterrestrial technology microwave energy?
Yes, many of their craft are powered by microwaves.
And
they give off microwaves.
And how do they? Is that not dangerous to the beings or the crafts? Because, you know, if we put food in a microwave, it completely obliterates and destroys our food.
Yes,
it turns food into a substance that our bodies don't even recognise because it changes the molecular structure of the food.
Yeah.
So what are these radio waves doing to humans? What are they doing to the extraterrestrials, the atmosphere? Is it safe?
Well, no one really knows for sure, because we do know for a fact that when mobile phones came in, there was no research done whether they run on microwaves, and no one really knows the effect of microwaves on the eyes or the brain, or even the hearing system and balance system within the body. Technology hasn't been around long enough for them to really figure out if there's any real harm to humans or not. So with regards to the Haarp system, you're dealing with a microwave oven which basically runs off the mains volts, which goes through a transformer. It is the voltage is uprated, the amperage is kept, you know, about 13 amp as you get with normal supply voltage, because you can't have the difference in voltage because the circuit just won't work properly, or it might overload and catch fire or even explode. So if the amperage is too high. So then goes through what they call a magnetron, which is a glorified magnet in the coating, which as it's electrified at high frequency, when the frequency gets above 500 megahertz, it then produces microwaves, which is then vented through into the oven to cook your food. And when you start dealing at higher amperages, way in excess of 13 amps, you're getting a normal, ordinary, home use microwave for cooking food. If you can bump that amperage up to such an extent that you can then begin to destroy the ozone layer on the Earth and change the weather patterns of the Earth by ionising the molecules of the air within our atmosphere with microwave energy, then you can change the weather. And what happens is, because these microwave molecules of air are also positively charged, they can interact and be attracted to the negatively charged ley lines around the Earth. And
what does that do then? The negatively charged ley lines, which have been hijacked by
they attract
malevolent
each other,
forces.
because, you know, negative and positive attract.
So the negative sucks in the energy from the ionised air.
Yeah, and the ionised
down
air
into the ley lines.
Yeah, and the ionised air could be in the form of clouds. You could turn like a normal light rain cloud into a full-blown storm, or even a hurricane. If you can have a nuclear device underneath the sea or underneath the Earth to cause a vortex, because around a nuclear explosion many people don't realise that there's a vortex, and you cause that air, that positively charged microwave air, to turn and spin into a vortex, you can create a hurricane. So don't you think it's odd that America and Caribbean have had an unusually high number of hurricanes over the last couple of years?
Absolutely, and that's just what I was gonna suggest we discuss, because
and that is what creates it.
So how does that actually work? So you're saying that it can amplify what's already there.
Yeah.
So they can't just take a hurricane and create it from nothing.
No.
There has to be some kind of rain, there has to be some kind of storm, and once they have that rain or that storm, they can do something. What is it they do to the rain or storm?
As long as there's clouds there in the first place, and you have a nuclear device in the ground or under the sea, electromagnetic waves. Remember, we talked about electromagnetic waves with nuclear explosions and when there's release, when a detonation of a bomb, a nuclear device goes off. You see that You see, just like the sun or the earth, it has a north and south pole and it has an equator around that device when it goes off. The electromagnetic waves, emissions from that explosion. Many people don't realise this, they keep this knowledge away from the public.
So they have to have an explosion under the ground?
Yeah.
That's the original
it
trigger
sets up
point.
the vortex which pulls all the clouds which are already ionised together.
So how are the clouds ionised?
By the electromagnetic
waves that are already going through the air.
Yeah, from Haarp.
So the Haarp machines, where are they?
There's one in Alaska, I know there's one in Alaska, and there are others. There's one in this country. But
and they're just pumping out serious amounts of microwaves all the time, and ionising the atmosphere?
Not all the time. They can't keep them running all the time.
Okay.
They don't stop them, they just turn them down.
Okay.
In frequency.
So there's always some kind of microwave frequency being let off into the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's always above, when you get above the higher frequencies, then it's when their power really comes into force, because they work by frequency. It's all frequency based.
Okay.
Because the higher the frequency, the longer the range.
So these frequencies are travelling through the atmosphere. I'm just trying to get a picture of this.
Yeah.
The frequencies are travelling through the ether, through the atmosphere, through our skies.
Yeah.
Okay, they're there constantly. This ionised environment. So whenever there's some clouds, they let off a detonation where? Under the ground?
No, it's detonated with a different method.
Okay.
Radio control, or it could be usually probably.
So does the detonation have to be near the cloud?
Yes.
Okay. So would they just go to that space, stick something in the ground, and detonate it?
No, it's all timed in a very elaborate, synchronised, computerised mathematical equation.
But they have to get a bomb to where the cloud is, right?
No, they just put a bomb in the ground or underneath the sea where they think clouds could form. They don't have to be directly underneath the cloud because they pull the cloud towards it.
So there could be a cloud 20 miles away.
Yeah.
They let this bomb off.
Yeah.
A vortex is created. What's the diameter of the vortex?
300 to 400 miles.
Okay, so it's gigantic.
Yeah.
So how big is this bomb that goes off under the ground? Is this a normal bomb, or is this some kind of special, different bomb?
It's a special kind of bomb, but exactly the details I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know. And it's a special kind of bomb that's based on research done on tactical nuclear weapons, which have a lower yield. They're just to kill people in the battlefield area, so they're designed to create radiation and a stronger electromagnetic field to make the vortex work more effectively than if it was just a blast bomb with radiation.
So this vortex starts spinning. Does it spin clockwise, anti-clockwise, a particular way?
Depends on the air currents around the Earth. It can spin either way.
Okay, does it make any difference?
As a general rule, they tend to go clockwise.
Okay, so they start to spin. If people are within that 400-mile radius of this vortex, is there going to be any effect on the human beings in that area?
They will just be hit by what they know as a hurricane. They won't know any different. They won't feel any different. There'll be no radiation sickness or anything.
But the vortex has to start spinning to draw in the ionised clouds before the hurricane can start. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So,
but something else I didn't mention that I ought to mention now is when these clouds are being pulled in, you'll get hot and cold clouds, and they will create thunderstorms, and they will create lightning within those clouds. As the vortex begins to develop into a hurricane, there will be lightning flashes, and that will ionise the air further and actually assist the development of the hurricane.
So the hot and the cold clouds.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, they detonate a bomb, they create the vortex, they start to draw in these ionised clouds, and the hot and cold clouds, they start to create lightning, there's a thunderstorm, there's a hurricane. Could they then let off another bomb, which then created a second vortex, which then drew in the already existing hurricane and amplified it? Is that possible?
No, because it would have a reverse effect where you create another vortex on top of another vortex, so there's a chance that they could cancel each other out to a degree, and the degree is on the equation of cause and effect. So they would cancel each other out to a degree, but you'd have a lesser hurricane. The first hurricane would be of lesser strength, and when it hit your intended population area, it would be of a weaker force, and the one coming in behind it, the second bomb would be also a little bit weaker, because the effect of cause and effect, if they're too close, that's why they tend to be over a week apart.
So how can they get a hurricane that lasts for a couple of weeks? How can they make it last so long just with one detonation and one vortex?
Because it follows the ley lines around the Earth. It's like
what follows the ley lines?
The actual hurricane itself, the microwave, positively charged particles of microwave.
So these hijacked ley lines by malevolent forces.
Yeah, they're just attracted to it, and they just
because they're negative. The positive attracts them. The negative attracts the positive. They're attracted to each other.
Yeah.
So what happens? This hurricane, it will just travel down the ley line from London to Manchester?
No, until it gets to a landmass. If it's out at sea, most of these are created out at sea because the public have no idea what's happening. They'll think it's just nature.
So they create it out at sea and it travels towards land. What happens when it gets to land?
Because over the land areas you have more of the weather fronts, and they affect how the tornado can travel. Now they can look at the weather forecast and they can plan this all in advance, and they say, well, the forecast for say 3 weeks time or 3 months time will be this, and then they can then use that knowledge, create this artificial hurricane, and then use the weather front to guide it in the remainder across the part of the land that they wish it to go.
Okay.
So it's an amalgamation of nature and man's
so it's kind of like
knowledge.
It's 50% orchestrated and 50% luck.
Yeah.
So there has to be some luck. And
yeah.
So sometimes it can go off and they can kill lots of people. Sometimes they may not kill that many people.
It's not A to B, zap, you're gone. It's not that at all. It's just there is a certain amount of nature and the elements of because, as you know, the weather over land masses is completely different to what it is over the sea, and sea is very good to create hurricanes because that's where most of our weather comes from in the first place. They're all created over sea, over ocean, and then they travel, hit the landmass, and then they break up into different varying weather patterns.
So you could have like one vortex, one crazy hurricane that hits a landmass, and then it might hit 7 different ley lines.
Yeah.
And the weather fronts could take it in 7 different directions.
They will use the weather
that's
fronts.
A possibility.
Yeah, they will use the predicted weather fronts to guide it into where they want it to go.
And what kind of areas do they target with these weather catastrophes?
Mainly what you've been hearing on the news, eastern United States.
And why eastern United States?
Mexico, South America to some extent, and as you've been seeing on the news recently, Caribbean.
Why are they targeting these areas?
It's for depopulation, part of their depopulation program.
And what is the depopulation program?
Well, they say that the Earth is overpopulated, and to some degree, I agree. Technically speaking, we can grow enough food to feed everyone. No one should go hungry. No one should be without accommodation. This shouldn't. This could be avoided, but they're not willing to spend their resources in this manner. So they've got a depopulation program. They say there's only 6 billion people on the Earth, but from what many extraterrestrial friends have said, the true figure is actually 7.4 billion and growing, and they tend to wipe out about 6 billion. The ideal figure would be around about 300 million people. And they have mass underground cities, underground tunnels. I haven't seen them, I don't know where they are, I just know they exist. They're able to see these tunnels. My friends are Andromedans have been sending sound waves to Earth to actually collapse some of those underground structures and tunnels. So that's why you've now got 18,000 greys have left Area 51 and gone to the moon. So instead of 18,000 greys on Earth, which were rotated from Area 51 to the moon and back, they have bases on the moon. And there's now 36,000 of them there.
Where?
On the moon.
On the moon?
Yeah, 18,000 moved out from Area 51.
And I mean, the moon's a whole other subject, which we've discussed briefly, and we'll come on to that another time. But this Haarp project, is there anything else you can share about this?
Well, the Haarp project is very real. All that I'm telling you or sharing with you all is very real. I would strongly advise that you do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Really, don't take my word for it. I only know a very, just a tip of the tentacle, if you excuse the analogy. But there is much more to this, much that we don't know, what we're not aware of. I can only tell you what I know, but I'd advise everyone out there with any interest in this whatsoever. Maybe you're an American citizen worrying about the safety of your family. Maybe you're in Australia because it's affecting everyone all over the world. Maybe you're in South Korea wondering if there's going to be a war between North Korea and the United States. It could be anywhere in the world, and no one is safe from it. But go out, do your research, look in second-hand bookstores, find any books, any information you can, and learn. So we used to have a saying in the military that knowledge is safety. You make you safe, and tell everyone out there to be safe and look after yourselves. Don't trust the governments of this world. Don't trust the Illuminati. All they have to do is shut down the banking system, and life on this planet ends. They can shut down the logistics that supply the food to your stores, because everyone's dependent on supermarkets for their food. They are destroying wild food. It's staggering how much wild food is being destroyed in some parts of the world, including England. It's now illegal to pick or forage for wild food, and they're also being damaged by the chemtrailing that's going on. It's worldwide.
Okay.
The various degrees. It's increasing in Britain.
This is amazing. I'm so happy, I'm so glad that you're here with me in this space, with Trevor, tuning into this information. I'm so grateful to Trevor for opening his heart and pouring his soul out and sharing with us, with you, with me, with the entire human race, the truth. Can you believe it? Having men in black turn up at your home, threatening you at gunpoint, high volumes of military data downloaded onto your laptop. How his wife became terminally ill after suffering at the hands of the men in black, the government. I mean, Trevor has seen so much, and we're sharing it here with you on The Cosmic Truth. Yes, thank you so much for tuning in once again to this episode of The Cosmic Truth. These messages are so important. Why? Because they set you free. Knowledge, truth, wisdom. It's inside your own cosmic heart. It's deep within you. All we're doing with these shows is triggering information, light, frequency, vibration that you already know. Join us on next week's episode of Cosmic Truth so you can continue to unfold, expand, explore the depths of your own cosmic heart where all the truth lies.